Hey folks, welcome everyone. I'm just going to wait a few seconds here for the screen to load on everyone's computers, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Okay, I think we're good to go. So welcome everyone again. So this is online meetup, and the topic today is making API requests in Okta Workflows. And my name is Max Katz. I lead community for Okta Workflows. And then you see my email there. So if you have any questions, feedback, anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. Always love getting emails from folks, who attended events or, but just in general. What else? This event is being recorded, and then the replay will be available right here on Crowdcast. So if you come back to this page, you'll see a recording once we're done. And then we will also post this on YouTube by tomorrow. You will also receive an email message that, with a link to YouTube and some additional resources. As for the topic, again, it's making API requests in Okta Workflows. And we'll go over three things: is how to use the built-in connection action, how to use the built-in custom API action, and then how to use a custom HTTP request. And again, if this kind of sounds very abstract, don't worry about it. That's why you're here. We'll see examples. The last thing is that if you would like, follow us on Crowdcast. So there should be a button, I think, at the upper right, I believe, for you to follow us, and then you'll be notified when we go live. So even if you don't register for an event, when we go live, you will be notified. All right. I think this is the last thing. If you would like to share, and I asked this in chat, tell us where you're joining from. And I'm joining from the San Francisco Bay Area today. And if you have any questions, you can put them in chat. There's also on the very right-hand side, there is a Q&A section. So you can put questions there as well. Other than that, I think we can get started. So this is the only slide that I have. I actually, my goal was to just no slides, well, just one slide. But then we're going to spend the rest of the time actually in workflows. All right. So let me show you my other screen. Give me a sec here. All right. And let me, perfect. Okay, so I built some examples, and then we're going to go over each example. So to start, we'll go with Okta 1 here. Okay, now, and I'm just going to show you various sort of ways you can call an API. Okay, now, if I'm assuming you're somewhat familiar with workflows. You've perhaps built a flow before, and so this is sort of the most basic way to call an API. Now, we're not setting up an API call here, but we're using an Okta read user card, right? We're going to read user, we're going to get information about a user. I've got user ID here. And now we're not setting up an API call, but behind the scenes, actually, it is an API call to using an Okta API, right? But it's still a way to connect to a service and get some data, okay? But this is, of course, the sort of the quickest or the most no code or the most visual way to do this, okay? So again, got a user ID, got a user, and then just using the Okta read user card to get information about this user. So this is, a common card you're probably going to use in a number of flows where you're working with users and you need to get additional information about the user. Okay, so we can, of course, if I want to, as I am building, just to kind of a tip, you can click a little button here to test a particular card, and then click test. and then we get information, and this is Olivia Green. We get information about the user, but of course we can also run this entire flow as well. I can click test, and we get the same result. All right. Now, so if I go to look at the Okta connector here, let me see Okta. So as you can see, there are a lot of different actions that I can call, right? And again, behind the scenes, these are all API calls. But again, you don't need to worry about setting up the API call or anything, okay? It's all done for you. Now, let me go back here. Now, Okta is, of course, one of them, but as you can see, there are many other connections that you can set up to various other services. Now, of course, before I can call this Okta service, I have to create a connection. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go into details because you just follow the steps, and it's kind of a step-by-step process that's not very sort of interesting. But you do need to create to have a connection to the Okta API. I will show you how to create one for another service. Okay, so that's a step that you need to do. All right, let me just save here. Anyhow, so this is one way to call an API, and this is probably the most common you'll be using as you're building flows. Okay, now let's go back and let's look at another option. Right, so this is using a card, right? Either for Okta or for any other service. Let's look at Okta 2. Now, and this is actually, the example is, using the same, getting the same information about a user. Now, in this case, we're using a custom API action, okay? Now, let me go back to here. Let's say you're opening this, connector, and you're looking through the API, but you're not finding the one that you need. But you do know that actually, if you go to the developer's website for this particular service, in this case it's Okta, you know that the endpoint actually exists, but you cannot find it here. So one option is to call what is, let me find it here, is a custom API action. So the way this works is that it uses the connection. So it uses the connection that you already have, but then it allows you to specify an endpoint, right? And so that's what I'm doing here, is that I'm specifying an endpoint, and this is the ID, and I am then building the actual endpoint, right? So this is the URL plus the user ID. And then notice here that the custom API action, it has a relative URL. So you do need to specify the URL. So of course, every API service will be a little bit different. So you do need to go to the website of that particular service and learn how to set up that endpoint, right? But you can always reuse the existing connection. So in this case, I'm using Okta here. So you don't need to set up the authentication. You can just use what you have. But let's run this. And right here, we can see this is the endpoint, and I can just open it. And you can see that this is the endpoint. And then right here, the body. And then we get information about Olivia here the same way. Okay. So we're getting the same information, but in a slightly different way. Okay, so again, the first one was using the built-in card. We just specify the ID and that's it. In this option, we are still using a card. We're using the existing connection, but now we do specify the endpoint. And again, this is useful when there is an endpoint that's not exposed as one of the actions in the card. Okay, now this one is exposed, but I'm just using it as an example. All right. All right, now the last option, let me go back. The last option is we're setting up a HTTP call ourselves. Okay, as you can see, there's a little bit more steps you need to take here. But notice at the end, I'm using an API connector get. So with this option, you can make an API call to any service, right? But you need to set it up yourself, right? So you need to set up the authentication, you need to set up the URL, you need to set up, any query parameters, any headers and so on. But in this example, I'm going to show you that we're going to call the same API. So now this one is a little bit, again, a few extra steps, but the first one is that you do need to specify the whole URL now. So we're not reusing the existing connection, right? So I'm specifying the URL. I've got the same user ID. Now here, I do need to set up the authentication. And this is what I have here. This creates a header. And if you want to test this quickly, this is how it looks. So it creates this header. Okay. And then I am again taking the URL, combining it with the user ID, and then connecting it to the URL. And then the header is connected to the header. All right. So again, same API behind the scenes, but we're not setting up, we're not reusing anything. So let's see how this works. I'm going to click test. All right. And we can see that, so right here, we got the URL, we got the user ID, and we can look at the sort of complete URL here with the user ID. And then we do a GET request. And then if I scroll, if I look at the body, we get the same information here, right, about Olivia. Right? So this is the third option. Of course, this is the most flexible, but also, of course, requires the most setup. Now, one thing also is that I've got this API key here, so you do need to set it up. Not to set it up, but you need to create it. Okay, and I'm going to include instructions in the follow-up message and also in the description once we upload to YouTube about how to get that API key. All right. But anyhow, so we've got three options. The first one, just using workflows, the built-in card, the built-in action. The second option is we're using the connection, but we're specifying the endpoint. And then the third option is we're specifying everything ourselves. All right. So, all right, let me turn this off. And let's look at another example. Let me just see if there are any questions first. I don't see any questions, so that's good. Okay. So let's continue. I have a second screen here and I just lost the view of my screen. So I just wanted to make sure that you folks can still see my screen, right? I see one question. So there is a card. Okay, good. All right, good. Let me see. So there's a question. There's a card where you do not specify method. What is the difference? Let me actually go back. So Dmitry, is it? Let me see. Is it this one? So yeah. So in this card. All right. No, I see. Okay, let me go to the other one. Let me go to. Is it the second flow that I was doing? Oh no. All right. Let's go to the third one then. Then it has to be this one. Is this the card you're asking about? let's see. No, there's a way to specify. There's a way to specify a method. Oh, I see what you mean. Like this one, the get. Yeah. So this does get, and then if I go back, not go back, but if I open this the functions menu, and if I find the card, so you can actually, you would need to choose which method you want to call, right? So I did the get one. This is the one that I'm using, right? So yes, so yeah, and then the raw request, yes. So you can actually, this is even more, right? So kind of more flexible, is it where you specify the actual method right on the card. So yes, that's another option, right? So I use the get, which sort of kind of built into the card, but yes, there's the raw one that gives you full control. Yes. So all right, let's go back. Okay, and we can save changes. All right. Cool. So the next one is I'm going to be using Shopify API, and let's open this one. Okay, so Shopify, if I open app action, actually Shopify is one of the connectors, and so I have a connection to Shopify. And if I open Shopify, we can see, so these are all the actions that I can call, right? And so one of them is create customer. And so this is the one that I'm using right here. So again, I do have a connection to Shopify that you need to create before using this card. But let's see, I have this user that I pre-filled names, and let's go to Shopify. So this is my Shopify account, and let me see if I can just quickly get my second monitor working. I don't know why it disappeared here. Let me try this. Come back. All right. So again, same API behind the scenes, but we're not. All right, I'm going to mute myself. Okay. So let's go here and let's test this card, and let's actually click test here. Okay. And so you can see we made a call to Shopify, and then again, we have a card here, but behind the scenes, of course, it makes an API to Shopify. If I go to Shopify here, I'm going to reload. Oh, let me see. It's not here yet. Let's see if I reload again. What was the user that I created? James. Sometimes I've seen, oh, I don't know why, but like if I search for it, I can see the person that I created. But if I show all the, but if I show list like this, it's not showing. But let me try one more thing. If I can delete James and try this just one more time. Delete. No, still here. Okay. Why not? We can just run this one more time. Okay, and let's see. Oh, still not here. I don't know, but that's okay. It's showing here. I don't know, something with the search, with the list. But again, we just use the built-in card to create a customer. But if you notice, if I go back to, Shopify, of course, there are, less actions available, right? This is the entire list. Now, what happens if you just want to get a list of customers? Okay, there's no action for that. And so what we can do is we can use the custom API action, right, to really call any other API that's not available here. And so the one we want to call is customer. So again, you do need to go to the developer docs for Shopify, and you need to sort of learn how to, what's the API endpoint. But But what's nice is that you can reuse the existing connection to the API. Let me just try one more time. I don't know why it's not showing. All right, well, let's go here. Let's go to Shopify 2. All right, and so here I actually got two cards, both custom API action. I'm specifying an endpoint here. So this is a count. So this will actually return the number of customers that I have, and I should have 4, even though before I was just showing 3. So we can test this. And let's see. So it is 4, right? So I've got 4 customers. And then this one returns all of them. And again, in both cases, I am reusing the connection. And if I test, and you can see that I got 4 customers, and you can see James is right here, right? And if I wanted, of course, I can just run the entire flow as well. All right, so let's see. We got 4, and this one, we got 4 customers. All right. So this is the Shopify example. Again, for the first one, we used the built-in card to create a customer. And then we wanted to get a list of customers from Shopify. And then we saw, well, no such action is available out of the box. And then we can use the connection that we already created. And then we just specify the endpoint. Okay. Now, the last example I'm going to show you is using an API that's not available at all out of the box in Workflows. Okay. And let me turn these flows off. And this is the Ship Engine API, and it allows you to work with different addresses to validate addresses and so on. And so here I'm using. Let me see here. I want to validate an address, right? I got an address here, which is Okta's address, and I want to just sort of validate it. Okay. Now, if I go to Shopify, so again, I do need to go to Shopify. I need to create an account, a developer account, and then sort of understand how to call this API. And then I'm using this validate an address. Also for authentication, you can see there's an API key, and it has to be a header parameter. So right here, right, I've got an API key. This is the name, and this is the value, and this is my API key. So if I test this card, just for fun, right, this is the header. So this is the body, and then I'm specifying the full URL here. Now notice the headers, and this is the body, and let's test this. Okay, and so let's look here, and we can see that the address was verified, and then this is the information that we get back from the Ship Engine API. Okay. Now, also at the beginning, I said I'm gonna show you how to create a connection. So notice that the API key I sort of hardcoded into this flow. Now, but let's say I want to use the Ship Engine API in another flow. So of course, one option I would need to copy and paste the API key and set it up this way. But I can actually create a connection. And so I'm going to copy this key, and I'm going to say new connection. I'm going to call this Engine 2. And then you can select the type. So in this particular case, for this API, it's going to be a custom. And then I can specify the header name, which is API key. And this is the value. I'm going to click create. And now notice the Ship Engine is selected here. Okay. And what I can do is I can actually delete this now, because I'm setting up the authentication via this connection. And if I open the list, I can see my connections. Okay. But maybe just to give you an example, just to show you, let's select none first. So this should give us an error. All right, so we get an error. And the last one, now we have to use the connection. And let's test. And now it works because it uses the connection. And then we get a verified address. All right, so we created the connection. And now if you use the Ship Engine API and any other flow, you can just use the connection. And if you want to see all the connections that you have, you can go to the connections page. And they already miss it. Yeah, let me see. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I was looking at this column. So this is right here, right? This is the connection that I just created. All right. Well, very cool. That's all I wanted to show you, right? So again, 3 ways. And if I go back here. Well, we can stay. It's fine. We can stay on this page. So 3 ways, right? The first one is just using the built-in card and the built-in action, right? If it's available from the list. Second option is you use the built-in connection and then you specify the endpoint, right? And then the third option is you create a custom HTTP request. So in that case, you have to set up the authorization, you have to set up the request, the URL, the query, the body. Just really depends, what API you're calling. So you do need to go and just sort of learn how the API works. All right. So yeah, those are the three options. And again, the goal was really to show you the difference between, like, especially in the first example where the 3 options, getting the same result. Hopefully that really showed you that we're getting the same result but different ways. So all right, let me see if there are any questions. So there's a question. Is this related to a custom connector? So a little bit, yes. So you could also use the custom connector builder to create a custom connection. So the way this would work is that, let me show you. Let me go back. Let me open a flow. So if you created a custom connector, then you would go here, and then your custom connector that you built would appear as a kind of icon, and so you can use it that way, right? So yes, that's another option. And then we hosted 2 online meetups in April and May, I believe. I was thinking March and April. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll find those, and then where we showed how to build a custom connector. But absolutely, that's another option, and that's sort of the ultimate option if you want to create a connection to a service that doesn't exist, and then you can define what actions are available there. So absolutely. Let me see. All right. So Farid. So that was the question from Farid, and then LA, same, I guess, same question. What about using custom connectors? Again, that's also an option. And then another question from Dimitri. It would be nice to see how to deal with paginating API response in your future sessions. So yeah, I can do a session on that. And it actually brings me to a question I have for everyone, is that, what next session would you like me to do? So pagination is one option. Another option I thought, and you can tell me if you like it, is that when you call an API, especially when you use the endpoint or the custom one, you get a JSON back, right? Then how do you retrieve information from that JSON? Okay, so that's also a common question. So perhaps something like that can be the next meetup, where again, how do you retrieve various information from the response? There's just no time to do it here. So that's another option. So again, pagination, or another option is how to get data from the JSON response that you receive. All right. Very good. Let me know if you have any questions. Well, I don't see any more questions, but you've got my email. Thank you, Dimitri. Thank you. Let me show this card again. This. So you've got my email. If you have any questions, please send them to me. Again, session ideas, but I've got two sessions ideas, so that's good. But yeah, other than that, thank you. One more thing, if you want to, there's something you want to share and you want to come on stage, right? Not today, but maybe in a future event, please let me know. And then, we can host the session together, or you want to maybe just, share what you built with workflows. So yeah, please let me know, and I'll be happy to schedule a session when, one of you or even multiple people can come on stage and just sort of share how they're using workflows. Again, super informal, very easygoing, just like this. All right. All right, folks. Thanks so much again for joining today. You'll receive an email message by tomorrow. But thank you, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.